Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, welcome. Happy to have you here. Alhamdulillah. Looking forward to today's controversial session, inshallah. This topic is gonna be pretty heavy. Lots of stuff to cover, different dynamics to cover, inshallah. So hope you enjoy it. Hope we all keep an open mind. I just wanted to give a short introduction. As the title of the space shows, this space will be about the video that Brother Shahid has uploaded yesterday, which is Iran and the axis of assistance. So, this is a very important topic because it is an important regional player, and we need to understand what his intentions are, what his relations are, what is his role in the future global, order. So, inshallah, I think this is very important to address, and that's why we're having the space to cement our understanding, to reflect on it, to try to question our own biases, inshallah. So it's very important, and this is our motivation and my motivation to hold this space. So hopefully, inshallah, it will achieve its purpose. So, without further ado, I'm gonna play the video now, inshallah. So enjoy listening to it, and let me know if the sound is unclear or something in the content talk group. Thank you very much and enjoy, and see you after this video, inshallah. Okay, Brother Shahid joined us, so he can listen to himself once more, inshallah. Bismillah.
Narrative. There's a whole narrative that has spread over the Middle East, the Israel-Palestine conflict, the whole Middle East. And it's like a canvas onto which a very different picture of the situation has been painted than the reality of the situation that's underneath the canvas. And everyone talks about the situation based on what has been painted on the canvas. And no one talks about the reality that it's covering. And I'm talking about Iran and the so-called axis of resistance. This is a carefully crafted narrative designed to obscure the reality of the region and the relationships in the region. Look, I was 10 years old when the Iranian Revolution occurred. And I was following events even at that time, news at that time. It was a big story in America, especially with the U.S. hostages, the embassy hostages and so on. So I've been listening to this narrative ever since, for 45 years. We've been told for 45 years that Iran is just about to wipe Israel off the map. Israel has told us this, Iran has told us this, and America has told us this, without interruption for nearly half a century. And for at least the last 20 years, Iran has been 2 weeks away from possessing nuclear weapons. So in other words, supposedly, Iran and Israel have been on the brink of catastrophic total war since I was 10 years old. Well, that's quite a wide brink. No one ever stepped in to try to ease the tensions either. Isn't that something? I mean, for half a century, these two countries have been allegedly engaged in hostilities, in technically a state of war. And there's never been any negotiations, no memorandums of understanding, no truces, no nothing. And no one, not the US, not the EU, not the United Nations, not even Jimmy Carter, has ever made any attempt to try to bring these two sides to a table, to try to take the region back from the alleged precipice of war. Now look at any other major conflict. The US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War were on the brink of nuclear annihilation, but still they found a way to negotiate. India and Pakistan, sworn enemies with nuclear weapons pointed at each other, still they sit down and talk. Even North Korea and South Korea, who are technically still at war, they've had countless negotiations, but here, with Iran and Israel, nothing, for almost half a century. This is virtually unheard of in the history of global politics. In almost any conflict and every conflict around the world, when the animosity drags on for too long, international players step in, mediators step in. They try to bring, both sides to the table to try to broker some kind of understanding. If only for the sake of regional security, the UN, the EU, somebody comes in, but not here. There's been no major international push ever to resolve this supposed tension. Not from the United States, not from Europe, not from the United Nations. Why is that? Why has no one ever tried to ease the tensions between these two nations? And yet somehow, without any peace efforts, without any negotiations, somehow, without any attempt to avert this catastrophic war that they keep scaring us with, war has never happened either. It's remarkable. Well, I'll tell you why. Because Israel and Iran have a symbiotic relationship. Not a genuinely hostile relationship, no. They both have a common interest, which is to divide and undermine the Arab world. And that's exactly what they've been doing for decades. This is a toxic marriage of convenience. I'm not saying that they like each other, but they're useful for each other and useful to America. Or anyway, that's the way it's been. That's been the case for a long time. I mean, many things are changing, as I've talked about many times. The regional and global order, world order, for the past 50 years is no longer viable. And we're in a period of transition. And it's a very rough transition. And it's a very dangerous transition, particularly for Iran. It's a very dangerous transition for Iran, and I'm not sure if they can transition. After 1979, Iran made a very public commitment to a particular style of government, a sectarian, religious style of government. And then they had an accompanying ethos as a nation with that. And that locked them in to a great extent on how they have to present themselves to the world and how they have to interact with the world and in the region. In the early days, during the time of Khomeini, it was even more radical than it is now, relatively speaking, and maybe even more genuine than it is now. But even then, even when they presented themselves as anti-West, anti-Israel, anti-imperialist, and so on, even at that time, Iran was still always pragmatic and practical and practiced realpolitik. For the first 10 years of the so-called Islamic Republic, at the very same time that they were calling for the destruction of Israel, they were buying weapons from Israel and engaged in high-level military intelligence cooperation. In fact, the more they cooperate and the more they coordinate, the more they have to proclaim their hostility. It's a performance to mask their pragmatism. They were fighting Saddam Hussein in the 1980s and buying weapons from Israel and getting weapons from America. Sanctions notwithstanding, an anti-American, anti-Israel rhetoric notwithstanding. In 1982, when Israel invaded Lebanon, there were a lot of resistance groups fighting them in Lebanon, Sunni groups, secular groups, and other Shiite groups. But Iran created Hezbollah, funded them, armed them, and trained them to the hilt, to where they eclipsed everyone else. This gave Iran the ability to dictate and control the resistance to Israel. It also gave them the ability to sow a sectarian division in Lebanon, radicalize the population, and exacerbate the civil war, all of which increased their influence in Lebanon. And it undermined the Sunnis and undermined the power and the authority of the Lebanese government. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Hezbollah has killed many, many times more Lebanese and Syrian Sunnis than they have ever killed Israelis. This is just a fact. I mean, if we were to go by the body count, we would have to conclude that Hezbollah's main mission has been against Sunni Muslims, not against Zionists. The government of Lebanon, by the way, has always, traditionally, historically, and now been much more aligned with Saudi Arabia and supported by Saudi Arabia and supported by the Gulf. Iran has not really invested much in Lebanon outside of Hezbollah. In fact, Iran has primarily only been investing in militancy across the region, not in infrastructure, not in hospitals, not in business, and so forth. And that's been enough for them. That's been enough to make them useful until now. So they were able to basically take control of opposition to Israel in Lebanon. in the 80s. And then in the 90s and the early 2000s, they provided the most significant funding for Hamas in Gaza in the early days, thereby giving them control to one extent or another over the opposition to Israel there. They also funded the Islamic Jihad in Gaza at that time. So they established their hold over opposition groups, over opposition to Israel, resistance to Israel in the north and in the south. And then they more or less lost interest in supporting Hamas once Hamas came to power in Gaza. This people overlook this. When they became a government, when Hamas became a government, and when the blockade was imposed, and when active resistance operations were no longer their main concern and they just had to survive, at that point, Qatar took over and they became their main supporters. It's because of them that Hamas was even able to have an administration in Gaza for all these years. Once they posed less of a threat to Israel, Iran lost interest. It was no longer important to them to control them. Now, you might interpret this as being because Iran was just so committed to militant resistance against Israel that when Hamas became a government and necessarily de-emphasized active resistance operations, Iran was no longer interested. But you might consider the fact that between the creation of Hamas and 2007, with Iranian backing, Hamas's main method for confronting Israel was by means of suicide bombings, not by sophisticated technology. Meanwhile, Hezbollah was being armed to the teeth, while Gazan resistance fighters from Hamas and Islamic Jihad still had to strap on bombs and deliver them with their own bodies. Now, Iran did help them get their first Qassam rockets, but compare the Qassam rockets with the missiles that Hezbollah has and that Hezbollah had at that time. No, in my opinion, it looks like Iran was controlling the resistance in Gaza, not empowering it. They were restricting the resistance, and they armed and funded Hezbollah in Lebanon to the point that they became a rival state in and of themselves. They became a parallel power structure in Lebanon, and no one else could emerge in terms of resistance. It's also worth noting that most outside funding for Gaza, in terms of infrastructure, hospitals, schools, clinics, and so on, that's also come from the Gulf countries predominantly, not Iran. And the same goes for Lebanon, like I said. Spending and investment in terms of things that promote social stability, all of that's coming from the Gulf. I'm saying that Iran has only ever acted pragmatically in the region for the purpose of increasing their own influence and undermining the stability, the unity, and the security of the Arab Sunni Muslims. And part of that has been to gain leverage and control over the anti-Israel resistance in the region. This is simply irrefutable. And in this regard, Israel's interests and Iran's interests coincide. Now, this will sound conspiratorial or maybe even insulting to Iran if you are fully and heavily invested in Iran's rhetoric and in that narrative that they're standing against Israel and they're standing against the West and so on. This is the narrative that Iran, Israel, and America have committed to, and it gives Iran credibility, which increases their influence. And it gives Israel the perfect pretext for their claim of being under constant existential threat, a claim which serves the purpose of the American military-industrial complex, funneling billions of taxpayer dollars into the weapons sector to protect Israel, supposedly. It's a symbiotic relationship, mutually beneficial for all three of these countries, Iran, America, and Israel. Iran has been extremely pragmatic and cunning and strategic, and they have actually positioned themselves as much more useful to America and to Israel than threatening. That's why no war has ever actually broken out in 50 years, despite all the hype. That's why Iraq was attacked after 9/11 instead of Iran, why Baghdad got shocked and awed instead of Tehran, why Saddam Hussein was the one who got hanged instead of Khamenei, and why basically delivering Iraq to Iran's sphere of influence was not an accident. All this time you thought that the US and Israel were trying to contain Iran. No, they have observably and demonstrably done nothing but expand Iran's reach. That's not accidental, because they are useful, not threatening. Not threatening anyway to America, not threatening to Israel, no. This is why the missile attacks in April and this week were coordinated, were orchestrated, and were choreographed, and why they did not result in any deliberate casualties, and why very little damage was actually done, because this is a form of political or geopolitical theater. Now, having said all of that, this is just to give you an understanding, a more accurate understanding of the role that Iran has actually played in the region for the last 50 years, because it's radically different from the narrative that we've all been fed for decades. However, as I have talked about many times, the global order is changing. Everybody's role in the Middle East is being altered, including Israel and including Iran. The BRICS aligned faction of the OCGFC, as again I've mentioned many times, I've mentioned it repeatedly, they appear to be supportive of Mohammed bin Salman's vision for the Middle East, which will mean stability, an end to conflict, development across the whole Arab side of the Mediterranean, and so on. Now, in my opinion, at least three elements in the region will need to be removed for any of this to work. Elements which have, until now, defined the region. They are Zionism, that has to go, militancy, that has to go, and the sectarian religious regime in Iran. So for the first time in 50 years, it's actually possible that Iran might actually be in danger. I don't think anyone seriously wants regime change in Iran to happen by means of war, because the collateral regional damage will be so massive. But for the first time in half a century, it could really happen at this point. I personally don't think that it will, but for the first time, it is a possibility. I think that Iran is making what you could call good faith gestures, even though that's a pretty grimly ironic term to use in this case. Gestures of good faith to try to show BRICS and to show the OCGFC that they can cooperate. Like I said, they boxed themselves in with their staunchly ideological posturing and public ethos. And now they have to try to prove that they can pivot away from that. I think this is why they allowed the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh and why they cooperated with Israel in the pager attacks, which Israel does not have the intelligence capacity to have done that alone. No. And it's why so many senior Hezbollah officers have been successfully eliminated by Israel, and why Hassan Nasrallah was sacrificed, because yes, I believe he was sacrificed. Because look, it has been an understanding for decades between America, Israel, and Iran that Hassan Nasrallah was not to be killed, because they had a belief that that were he to be assassinated, it would necessarily result in escalation and retaliation by Iran, and nobody wanted to see that happen. Because again, for the sake of their image, Iran necessarily would have to do that if Nasrallah was murdered. However, now I believe that everyone agrees that these groups, both Hamas and Hezbollah, have to be dissolved. Well, you can't just disband them. That's not feasible. So you have to dissolve them amidst the fog of war, behind smoke screen, the screen of gun smoke. And no matter what anyone says, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah was a massive blow to Hezbollah. And the fact that Iran retaliated for Haniyeh, the pagers, and the killing of Hassan Nasrallah all together in one visibly dramatic but practically unsubstantial attack, well, that says volumes. It says to me that Iran is trying to not only distance themselves from these militant groups, from both Hamas and Hezbollah, but especially Hezbollah, but they're actually cooperating in their gradual elimination. This is what's going on with Israel and Lebanon right now, in my opinion. The idea is for both Israel and Hezbollah to get involved in a grinding stalemate that will weaken both of them. Their airstrikes in Syria are also mostly targeted towards Hezbollah targets. And Bashar al-Assad has not responded in any meaningful way. These the locations that they're targeting are not being defended. I believe that Israel has been given the green light, not only by the U.S., but I think that this green light has been given by the U.S. because Iran has signaled that they will not seriously respond. And this is to demonstrate to BRICS and to the OCGFC that Iran is ready to play ball and they're ready to participate in this new vision for the region. By doing this, they think, and they might be right, that they can save themselves from regime change and from actual war and invasion. Now, understand, I don't think that Israel, or anyway Netanyahu, I don't think they understand any of this. They're doing what they're doing because they're psychotic fanatics. But after decades of dealing with them, everyone in the region has fully understood how to predict their behavior. And predictable behavior can be manipulated. And I think that Israel is being manipulated. They truly do not understand that all of their actions are doing nothing but weaken them. Their belligerence and their hubris is causing them to think that they're winning. But they're doing nothing but lose steadily. You know, Iran is not making any decisions today without consulting BRICS partners first. They're talking to Russia, they're talking to China, they're talking to Saudi Arabia, and the whole region now is following one playbook. So the advice that Iran is getting from these other countries, these BRICS nations, is all based on the grand strategy for achieving regional cohesion and stability and prosperity. And I think to a great extent, America's reactions are also being guided by the BRICS-aligned OCGFC and by Saudi Arabia and by the UAE because the neocons, the political faction of the military-industrial complex, their influence has decreased considerably over the last several years, not to mention the fact that even for the neocons and even for the Zionists, destroying Iran is not a long-term profitable idea. As I said, Iran posing as the big bad threat to Israel has been an incredibly lucrative premise for the U.S. and for Israel. So if Iran is destroyed and either becomes an occupied country or gets shattered into a chaos and it becomes a playground for militant groups or what have you, it will be significantly reduced as a plausible threat. So I think that for even the most warmongering faction in the U.S., which is the neocons, I think even for them, they understand that destroying Iran is something that they can always talk about, but they should never actually pursue in real life. I mean, maybe only Lindsey Graham is dumb enough to really think annihilating Iran is a good idea. I think even those who want to still try to hang on to the post-World War II world order understand that Iran has served as a valuable asset to Western imperialism. And it has maintained a beneficial balance of power in the Middle East for them. And it's been a source of division and destabilization alongside Israel. But for the more forward-thinking officials in the U.S., war with Iran is understood as the worst possible move they could make. The only question is whether regime change can be achieved without war in Iran. And that's an open question. Like I said, I think the Iranian government is trying to save itself from regime change by proving that they can abandon their historical role in the region and actually start cooperating with the Arabs and with the Gulf. And the Arabs and the Gulf are reciprocating in good faith by declaring their neutrality. They said that they're not going to cooperate in any attack against Iran because the priority for them now, and the priority for BRICS, and the priority for this faction of the OCGFC is to isolate America from the region and try to reduce American interference as much as possible. But the Iranian regime has a lot of baggage. I mean, I think they're trying to jettison some of that baggage now, but it remains to be seen whether or not this is going to be sufficient. People need to understand that there's only one permanent power game in the Middle East, and that's between the Persians and the Arabs. every outsider, whether it was the Crusaders, whether it's the colonizers, whether it's the Zionists, the Americans, or even the Russians or the Chinese, outsiders are all viewed as transient players in the region who are basically only tools. They're either tools or obstacles or weapons or impediments of some kind that have to just be factored in by the indigenous people when they strategize how to achieve their own dominance in that permanent power game between the Persians and the Arabs. Now, Iran has heavily relied on being aligned with the imperialists covertly for decades. And while they have enjoyed significant expansion of their influence as a result into Iraq, into Lebanon, into Syria, into Yemen, and so on, the boogeyman role that they have historically played is working against their long-term interests now. And the countries that are really leading the effort for remodeling the Middle East and who have a real vision for the region is the Arabs. And they're pursuing it by means of money, not militancy, by means of diplomacy and politicking, not collusion with the colonizers, and subversion of Arab governments, by building unity, not sowing division, promoting stability, not disruption. So Iran has a massive amount of adapting to do. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe within the next 5 years or so, maybe sooner, maybe later, depending on several variables, I think we'll see Iran actually proposing their own normalization with Israel. I'm quite sure that that's the end game. If the Saudis, for example, are unable to successfully pressure for the establishment of a Palestinian state, well, then Iran can offer normalization on the same condition as the Saudis, meaning the establishment of a Palestinian state. Or maybe they can demand a one-state solution in exchange for normalization. But either way, normalization is actually the best card that they're still holding, even though, you know, a huge amount of preparation domestically would be necessary before you could get the population to accept it. But their proxies are going to be ground down over the next few years, and they're going to have to completely modify their national ethos in order to participate in the regional BRICS project. And if they don't normalize with Israel, then the GCC and Turkey are going to get the lion's share of the economic leverage over Israel and over Lebanon and over Syria. And all of the gains that Iran has made in the expansion of their sphere of influence is going to evaporate. And their sphere of influence has always been their main concern. Let me be clear about that. I'm not saying that Iran has been working with Israel and with America because they love them. No, they've been doing it for very pragmatic reasons. Now, that might be incredibly offensive to highly ideological people, but this is how states operate in real life. Iran has been operating this way pragmatically for the purpose of expanding their influence, and they have been quite successful. And part of their strategy has been to mask their violence and their destabilization against Arab Sunnis by means of loud but factually limited opposition to Israel and by posturing as Israel's big boogeyman without ever seriously posing a real threat to Israel, to the point that they can actually launch hundreds of ballistic missiles against Israel without causing any major damage or casualties to Israel. But it has to be understood that none of these parties are friends. I'm not suggesting that America, Israel, and Iran. No. They simply have had aligned interests. Like I said, Hezbollah has killed Sunnis by orders of magnitude far more than they killed Israelis. And if you add to that the Iranian-backed militants in Iraq, and then add to that the Houthis in Yemen, well, the number of Muslims that Iran has killed directly or through their proxies is off the charts. And through these means, and through supporting Bashar al-Assad against the majority Sunni population of Syria, Iran has been able to simultaneously divide the region, destabilize the region, gain greater influence in the region, strengthen Israel, collaborate with the Americans against Iraq, against the Taliban, against Syrian rebels, even against Turkey, all while maintaining their image as defiant of the West. And with them and their proxies being able to call themselves the Axis of Resistance. And there's many people who genuinely believe it's true. But I'm asking, resistance against what? Resistance against who? Again, this has worked for them very well up until now, but it's not going to work anymore. Ending Zionism makes Iran's sphere of influence unsustainable. Ending militancy makes Iran's sphere of influence unsustainable. Because these two things have been the key factors in how they achieved their sphere of influence. Regional conflict ending makes their sphere of influence unsustainable. You can't keep a sectarian, armed, parallel government in Lebanon whose only rationale for existence is opposition to Israel. If you want to participate in a project for regional stability and prosperity, which includes integrating Israel into the region and includes a permanent resolution to the Palestinian conflict. So most of what Iran has depended upon to build their sphere of influence is becoming obsolete, or is going to become obsolete. I don't know if the so-called revolutionary Shia government of Iran, as it is currently configured, I don't know if they can make the transition. But frankly, whether or not they can convince BRICS and whether or not they can convince the OCGFC that they can make that transition, that might just be their best bet for averting regime change by means of either war or assassination or color revolution. Because I think that these are the only options that they have with regards to the future of their state, the future of their government. But in the long term, Iran does have to prove that they can play ball and that they can approach the region in some way other than through the creation of militias.
Assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum to everyone who joined. Welcome to our space. I hope you enjoyed this heavy video recording. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, Brother Shaheed, thank you very much. Okay, so to Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, to anyone that joined us today and during the video, we will basically look into this misunderstood role Iran has played in the Middle East. And it has played this role for the past basically 50 years. So, contrary to this public narrative of hostility, Ustaz alludes that the relationship between Iran, Israel, and US is one of a strategic manipulation and pragmatic alliances. Right? And these are rooted in some mutual benefit between these three parties. So we need to reassess Iran's traditional influence strategy, right, which was basically until now built on conflict and resistance. Iran, based on what Brother Shaheed analyzed, is forced to either adapt to this new global order that is coming, inshallah, or it will risk collapse. So before we start, we were thinking, inshallah, to mention a couple of notes about, open-mindedness, right? We should spend a couple of minutes thinking about this, especially in relation to this topic, right? Because it is on one part an emotional topic, it is on one part, especially given the situation that we are seeing with Palestine, a lot of people are invested emotionally, so we need to, as inshallah Muslim brothers and sisters, to remind ourselves what is the purpose of this, right? We're not trying to blame anyone for stuff. We're not trying to shed a negative light, a positive light. We're just stating facts. Yeah, and facts, as Ben Shapiro says, they don't care about your emotions, right? And I don't like that guy, but it's just funny to think about it in relation to this topic. So, open-mindedness, it's not just about hearing other perspective. That is kind of easy to a certain degree, right? But it is about being humble right? That we may not have all the answers. You know, we are like constantly required to step beyond the comfort of our own assumptions, right? And we need to deeply consider the viewpoint of others, even when they challenge our own deeply held beliefs, right? And this is basically the foundation of some sort of wisdom, of some sort of intellectual growth, right? Like if you're not open-minded, you will not know that you are wrong until it's too late, right? But even more profound are the teachings of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? Many of the hadith encourage us to, seek knowledge, seek wisdom, and this is regardless of where it comes from. Right? We need to be open with new insights, no matter how unconventional they might seem. And even the Quran itself reminds us, right, to think critically, to reflect deeply, and to be humble in accepting what is true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Zumar, الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه أولئك الذين هداهم الله وأولئك هم أولو الألباب. Yeah, and subhanallah, this verse emphasizes that to be guided by Allah, أولئك الذين هداهم الله, means to listen, right, to consider, and then to choose the best path. Right? This is the true open-mindedness. It's not about blindly accepting or blindly rejecting, but trying to filter information through this lens of humility, through intellect, and most importantly, of course, through Islam itself. Right? And this is always just about, this is about being just, right? It's about being fair. And the only way we can, as Muslims, be fair and achieve this is by trying to view everything as objectively as possible, right? So, this is not a sign of weakness or doubt. It's in fact a sign of strength, right? It signifies that we are mature enough to try to learn, right? That we have the courage to grow, that we, inshallah, have the wisdom to admit that my perspective is not the only one that exists, right? The guy next to me might know it better. So, subhanAllah, when the Prophet engaged, and we see this in the seerah, we see this in different hadith, when engaged with different people of different stratas, of different faith, different opinions, he always listened and responded with patience, with wisdom, and especially with profound insights, right? Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So, I would like also Brother Shahid to maybe, or anyone else from our speakers, if you want to add something to this point, just before, we head into the deep waters of the ocean, I would just maybe spend 2 more minutes thinking about why it's so important and what is the purpose of this, right? If, Brother Shahid can somehow just give 2, 3 sentences based on what was your motivation and how do you view it, how it should be perceived, how it should be received.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay. Well, the purpose of it is the purpose of pretty much all of the videos that I put out, which is just to try as best I can, as best according to my own understanding and observation of 50 something years, to understand the reality of any given situation. If you don't understand the reality of any given situation, then you will make wrong judgments about it, and in terms of your own strategies and your own approach, you will make mistakes. So it's very important to have to try to have an accurate understanding of the world and of any particular or any given situation, whether you're talking about an individual or you're talking about a nation or what have you. If you listen carefully to what I said in that video, all I said is that Iran operates the same way that any other state operates, which is pragmatically to secure their interests. That's all I said. But there are people who have a need to believe in an idealized version of a country, and this happens to to people of with regards to any country. The most prominent example, of course, is Americans about America, where they need to believe that America is this beacon of virtue and wonderfulness and justice and so forth. And when you have become indoctrinated to that sort of a propaganda about your own country or about another country, well, you will never understand what they do. And then when you find out what they do, you'll feel betrayed, and you'll feel that that country is treacherous and diabolical and so on. Now, what I'm talking about with regards to Iran is not to suggest that they're treacherous or diabolical or any of those things, but I'm just suggesting that it's a normal country, that it operates like any other country does. And I think that they have done it extremely, extremely well. The strategy that they have adopted over the last 45 so years, nearly half a century, has served them very well. And they were in a tough position after 1979. They were in a very tough position, and they have been able to function. They've been able to survive, and they have reached the point where they're thriving to one extent or another. And they have, in fact, increased their sphere of influence in ways that you could not really have predicted in 1979. They've been very successful in their strategies. And I think that if you have a need to believe, this is the response that I get when I talk about Iran. If you don't believe, Shahid, if you don't believe that Iran is valiant and noble and virtuous and perfect and wonderful, well, then you're just biased against Iran. In other words, if you don't have an irrational pro-Iranian bias, then you're biased. So this reveals itself that the person who's addressing you is themselves heavily propagandized and indoctrinated and has an emotional need to believe something. I don't. I don't have an emotional need to believe anything, not about Iran, not about Saudi Arabia, not about America, not about any place. As a Muslim, you have to tell the truth and you have to try to understand reality, again, as I said, as best you can. And be realistic and understand in this particular case, as in any analysis of any country and any policy that any country adopts, you have to understand that countries operate as realists. They operate pragmatically and practically and realistically, given the options that they have. And Iran is no different. They're no different. But if you have the need to believe in a sort of a myth, of an idealized myth about Iran or anywhere else, you will be categorically wrong in your assessment of that country, whatever country you're talking about.
Shukran. Thank you, brother Shahid. Exactly right. Like, this is exactly what it's about, right? We are trying to find the truth, inshallah. And, we are human beings. Human beings sometimes fall into mistakes. That's normal. Our father Adam slipped into a mistake. This is what happens, right? We are not saying we are 100% true in everything, but we are trying as best as possible to be objective, to assess things for how they are, inshallah. So, exactly, when approaching the controversial topics, especially like the one we are dealing with today, we must embody everything that Brother Shahid has said. We need to be radically open minded, inshallah. Sorry, Sister Wahida. I don't know if you are open mic by mistake or.
No, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sister.
Okay. I just say bravo to Brother Shahid for this video. I was in my early 20s when the Iranian Islamic Revolution took place. I watched the whole crisis with the hostages, watched them being released, and watched the solidification of the new Iranian government after the release of the American hostages. I would venture to say that a great deal of, if not most of the people who have been commenting so negatively on Brother Shahid's take on this situation are much younger than I. For years, I watched this and I recognized after 15 years of all of this saber rattling that that's just what it was. It was saber rattling on the side of the United States, on the side of Israel, and on the side of the Islamic Republic. Just saber rattling. I have watched the United States send troops into so many nations on so many pretexts over these 50 years. Where did they not send troops? They didn't send them into Iran. that, the Israelis didn't go into Iran. The Israelis didn't bomb Iran. The Israelis bombed everything and its brother, except for Iran and Saudi Arabia, because that's just a no go, because it's where our holiest cities are. There are a whole lot of us, and everyone knows that if you bomb Saudi Arabia, all bets are off, bend over, kiss your behind goodbye, because the Muslims are going to go crazy. So I have watched this and I came to the conclusion a long time ago that this was, as Brother Shaheed says, political theater, and that it was helping the military industrial complex to have American tax dollars transferred to it on the pretext of having to shore ourselves up against the Iranian threat, which has turned out to be non existent, and the same with the Israelis. It's kind of, to me, ridiculous to continue to believe the myth that has been put out there. How many times does the shepherd boy have to cry wolf before we figure out, as his flock increases, that there is no wolf? And why people are so angry with Brother Shaheed and calling him, a turncoat and a Zionist. Tell me, what damage has Iran really done to Israel? Iran can send missiles into Tel Aviv. Iran has the capability to obliterate Tel Aviv, but Tel Aviv is still standing. Iran threatens to obliterate it, but Iran does not do so. And I understood that it would be impossible for that region of the world to gain stability with essentially an a-national military as the second strongest military to Israel in the region, meaning Hezbollah. I knew they couldn't continue. And I knew that the state actors in the region did not want them to continue. People do not willingly give up power. So I didn't expect Hezbollah to ever say, well, you know what? We're going to give up our guns and we're going to fold ourselves into the Lebanese military. So this is what is happening. This is essentially a necessary cleanup, because the region cannot continue the way it has been continuing. Anyway, that's my take on it, and maybe I'll come back later on and say a few other things that are going on here in America that I think people don't pay attention to and should. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Sister Wahida. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's get straight into the video, right? We've been waiting for it, so yallah. Okay, so right from the start, right in the first part of the video, our brother Shaheed, he kind of challenges this narrative, right? That Iran and Israel have been on the verge of this catastrophic war for almost half a century. And we can see continuous claims in the media, in the news, right, that Iran is this major threat to Israel's existence. And there's always, there was this funny also thing, right, where it's on the brink of possessing or using nuclear weapons, like this scary word, right, that is used often. But this conflict has never actually materialized, right? And Sister Wahida also spoke about it now beautifully. So we understand what is being said, right? So basically, what Brother Shaheed implies is that this narrative has been constructed and sustained deliberately, right? And has been actually shaping perception for the past 5 decades. My question is to our beloved speakers. So if Iran has consistently been portrayed as this imminent threat to Israel, and without any direct military escalation, what purpose might this narrative serve for Iran, Israel, and the Middle Eastern landscape?
Yes, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As established in the content, Iran was supposed to be America's staunch enemy for the last 50 years, yet somehow America continuously accidentally bolstered Iran's regional influence. Um, and again, I mean, we are talking about a pragmatic state here, which is just operating to exist and creating its own narrative. And it started out hot because when the Shah was overthrown by the Ayatollah, it was unthinkable that they would be linked to the West in any way, because everyone viewed the Shah as a reinstallment of Western influence after they ended the rule of Mossadegh. But slowly over the years, a pattern emerged. SubhanAllah. Somehow, America and Iran seem to always have shared enemies. Of course, Iran can never be right, so America would swoop in, attack, and create this power vacuum that somehow always got filled by Iranian-backed militants. The pattern made those two a de facto coalition, like a good cop, bad cop routine. They both had the same goal, but seemingly have opposing views. So when it comes to us perceiving Iran, it's quite a complex thing. Any group trying to assess this is left genuinely dizzy by this pragmatic way that Iran operates, regardless of what point of view you look at it, whether a Muslim or an Arab or a Persian. But from an Arab point of view, do they forsake all the Arab rulers and look to the Iranian power to restore Arab sovereignty while casting aside their own leaders as traitors? It casts quite a mirage when Iran is the one carrying the proverbial sword, so much so that the Arabs are blinded to the good that the leaders are doing. Whether it be an MBS who has been vocal for Palestinian sovereignty, making it clear that he will have nothing to do with Israel. All the Arabs have been on the same page. Even in the United Nations here recently, we saw them speak out loud about how they're united, but most people are looking at Iran because of the narrative they've created. They're the ones with the sword. Ultimately, regardless of what angle we view Iran from, two things are clear. They are extremely clever. They understood the covert methodology of the West and played their role to a T, growing their power and crowning themselves the heroes of all Muslims. And the second thing is, once the fog clears, there isn't a chance for such a regime to continue existing. The same clever planning that got them to where they are will be their undoing. The ironic parallel of Iran and America isn't just the covert nature of how they rose to prominence, it's also how easily it all gets dismantled once you see the pattern and the evidence becomes irrefutable. The future of Iran, whether independently or part of a greater regional union, cannot involve the current regime. How that happens is a matter of time to tell. Wallahu alam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, brother. Sister Wahida.
Yeah, I just want to thank Brother Ali. What he said is really, really accurate, I believe. And I'm just going to say this. I have a wide specter of people in my family, all of whom I associate with closely. Among those, one of my Orthodox Jewish relatives who is an Israeli, Israeli born and bred, and whose home I have been to, and more than once and whatnot, and who I see with my Florida relatives when I go and visit them. This man said to me in an extended conversation I had at my sister's house a few years ago, he said to me, I really like Arabia. And while that may not seem like a major statement, I know what he does for a living. So I understood the circumstances under which he had been dealing with Iranians. Okay, this is a person who is in the Israeli military security establishment and has been for decades. The reason that he lives in South Florida is because America's military central command, known as CENTCOM, is headquartered there. So, I have known for years that Israel had close dealings with Iranians, and people just don't realize this. I essentially lucked up on that fact in a very direct manner simply because this is a member of my family. But what Usted says is correct. what Brother Ali said is correct. And if you just look at the amount of time, the number of decades that have taken place in which Iran just plays the part of the boogeyman, but yet doesn't behave as a boogeyman, you'll understand what's going on. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Sister Wahida. Yeah, Brother MG, please.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So
Alaikum
I
assalam.
I'm going to talk about. I mean, we've already went very deeply into the topic of Iran and the axis of resistance or assistance. I want to be as constructive as I can with this issue. I think one of the problems that we have faced, I would say, as the Arab world, Muslim world, particularly the Arab world, the geographic area of the Middle East, is that we are very emotionally driven by our reactions to what we hear from the news, what we hear from the events, and so forth. And this has cost us for decades a lot. In terms of, for a variety of, a lot in a variety of aspects, emotionally, politically, and strategically, most of all, because this has cascaded not just between the masses, but also all the way up until even some segments of the leadership across the region. Iran, the Arab world, whichever one you would like to choose. And this has caused a lot of diplomatic fallout between all of these countries together. And we need to change the way we look at the world. We need to change the way in how we perceive events. When I'm talking about the OCGFC in this context, I'm talking about those that are aligned with the neocons. For decades, they don't think the same. They don't think as emotionally as we do. They think in terms of strategic outcome. They wanted a region for decades with a landscape that is constantly in animosity with each other. So they might help Iran at some point in time, but then later they might help other groups at some point in time. So it is not about are they together with Iran? Are they also? Are they not? It's about creating a landscape where the animosity is away from the core issue that is plaguing the region, and you would find that, let's say, the regime in Iran collapses, the neocon aligned OCGFC will try to start another Arab Spring in the Arab world, because they don't want these two blocks in the region to be coalesced, aligned on a particular strategy. So I'm not talking here about, oh, we're going to be hostile towards Israel, or we're going to take a more soft path. No, it's talking about generally a strategized approach, one that we all commit to, regardless what it is, and we fulfill it. So they don't want that. It's not about who's hostile and who isn't. It's about organizing and agreeing on a particular approach that we take. At the moment, until very recently, until China managed to get Saudi Arabia and Iran together, there was a divergence in terms of the strategy towards the Middle East. And at the moment, there's an aligning of the vision that we see. So we need to look at this from that angle. And of course, we have to understand also the geographic factors that are involved. Iran is capable of being quote unquote hostile, to those who perceive it as hostile or not, to Israel. Is also, there's a geographic factor that aids in that. They are very far away from Israel. They have very rough terrain, and they don't fear the idea of one day they will wake up and find the Israeli army in Tehran. That's not the case with Jordan. That's not the case with Egypt, where Sinai, the north of Sinai, is very flat, and you can find them on the Suez Canal. So there's lots of things that you need to think about. Strategy of nations play a role in that. The geography of nations play a role in that, and you have to understand that before you start, making a takfir or a takhween in one country or another. You have to understand countries and nations within their rightful contexts and within the historical experiences that they've been through. So that's all I can say from that angle. And if anyone can care to contribute, you're more than welcome.
Thank you very much, Habibi. That was great, and especially how you tied all of these. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, brilliant mind. Shukran. So, like, this is basically this supposed animosity is primarily, Brother Shahid emphasizes that it's a strategic tool to somehow manipulate regional dynamics, right? So I would like to ask, how does this orchestrated, strategic, presented as hostility, how does this arrangement serve the individual goals of the parties involved, right? So we are speaking about Iran, Israel, and basically the US, right? When we talk about Israel, it's just a puppet of, some bigger factions at play. And already Brother MG spoke about the neocons and so on, and inshallah we'll get to that later. But what, does this arrangement and the goals, what implications does it have for the stability and unity of the Middle East?
Well, first of all, I want to just clarify something also, which is that any state with ambition, with expansionist ambition, that wants to increase their sphere of influence, they will have animosity to anyone and everyone who interferes with their sphere of influence. If we talk about Iran's hostility or animosity towards Israel, Israel is, to one degree or another, a competitor for influence in the region. So, it's not. This is the thing when you're talking about states and the behavior of states and the policies of states. We're not talking about friending and unfriending people on Facebook. It's much more nuanced and complex than that. So what my argument is that Iran does not pose the threat or the danger to Israel that we've always been told that it does. And America knows that, and Israel knows that, and Iran knows that. But the public expressions of hostility and threat and all of this sort of bombastic language, that is performative, pure and simple. It is performative. That doesn't mean, as I repeated many times in the video, that doesn't mean that they like each other. Of course, they don't like each other. No state likes another state unless they can have their way and get what they want from that state. And even then, they only like them insofar as they can get what they want. This is about interests. I mean, I repeated that many times in the video with regards to, like, for example, how this hostility, these expressions of hostility, have, for example, benefited Iran. Well, it gave them the ability to have Hezbollah and basically give them the ability to have influence in Lebanon, for example, that they would not otherwise have. The same in Syria. The whole, as Ali was saying, the whole basis for, and as I said in the video, the whole basis for the expansion of their sphere of influence has been based upon their proclamation of their hostility to Israel. That gives you, or any state that builds its influence on that basis, that gives you a vested interest in maintaining that country. You have to maintain that threat. You have to maintain that animosity. You have to maintain that antagonism, because that's the whole basis for the rationale of your existence. I mean, Hezbollah doesn't have a reason to exist except for the animosity to Israel. And like Sister Wahida was saying, they don't have a reason to have refused to give up their weapons, for example, when all of the other factions in Lebanon were supposed to give up their weapons. Hezbollah didn't. And the rationale for that is, well, we have to protect Lebanon from Israel. Their influence is based on the animosity, the public animosity, the expressions and the official antagonism between them and Israel. This has been the whole basis for the expansion of their influence, except for, with the only exception being the destruction of Iraq. that was just gifted to them by the Americans. That was just gifted to Iran by the Americans to basically hand Iraq over to Iran. But their influence in Syria, their influence in Lebanon, this is completely based upon the perpetuation of Zionist threat. I mean, change my mind. That's the whole basis for it. And like Sister Wahida was saying, if you like with Hezbollah and Iran's relationship, if you care about Lebanon, why don't you invest in Lebanon? Why don't you, instead of creating a parallel group, instead of creating a sort of a shadow government, why don't you support the government itself in Lebanon? If you want to send all of your weapons and your arms and whatnot, why to Hezbollah? Why not to the army of Lebanon? Why don't you want to strengthen them? And this is where the sectarian nature of their policy comes in, and this is just an observation. It's not making a judgment about it. It's not saying this isn't an anti-Shi'i anything, but this is the position of the government of Iran. It is a Shia religious regime explicitly, and this is their priority. And so if you're analyzing their policies, you have to understand it within the context of their own reasoning. And their reasoning is to support their particular ideological belief and to try to get try to increase the influence of that ideological belief. And they are, as an ideological belief, a minority in the region. So they have to come up with some way of how you spread that when the region is not receptive to it, and one of the ways is by posturing and posing and presenting yourself as this big hero to rescue the Palestinians, while you have not rescued the Palestinians in 50 years. The only countries in the region that have ever actually gone to war with Israel, on that list, Iran is not there. Egypt has done it, Syria has done it, Lebanon has done it, Jordan has participated in that. Even Saudi Arabia has participated in that back in the day. So if you're looking at countries that who actually have a record of going to war with Israel, Iran is not one of them. And they're very interested, as I said, in spreading their particular ideological belief system. And this, again, is explicitly stated by them and by Khomeini upon the founding of the Republic that they wanted to spread this. Now, as I said, how do you spread that in a region that is not receptive to it? Well, you have to present yourself in some other way that is more admirable and likable and so on. This, in fact, was one of the things, I didn't even mention it in the video. This was, in fact, one of the reasons why they had a split with Hamas. Because at the time of this is when it sort of was the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, because they still had, although it was drastically reduced, their support for Hamas after they gained power in Gaza, they were still supportive in one way or another. But once the civil war broke out in Syria, well, they wanted Hamas to support their position in supporting Bashar, and Hamas refused. They didn't accept that. And this was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. So it was an ideological issue for them. And as I say, you present yourself as this hero of the Palestinians, this valiant, wonderful, noble liberator of Palestine, with no results, by the way. But you present yourself as that, and that makes you appealing in a way that you would not be appealing otherwise, on the basis of the fact that you have a minority belief system within the region.
MashaAllah, Brother Shahid. Shukran. I thought Brother Turabi wanted to speak, but I feel he's here. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome, brother. Happy to have you here.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. First and foremost, we appreciate, I'm not going to go on for too long, but I do want to make a couple of points. Middle Nation has created a platform that is predicated upon spreading an analysis that is meant to be as objective as possible, which means full analysis. And there has been a conflation with Iran attacking Israel and Iran attacking Israel to help Palestine, which is something that we all want to see happen. It is an emotional one for anyone who doesn't want to see the genocide of our Palestinian brothers and sisters in faith and in humanity. This idea of someone finally standing up to this bully that has not been stopped, that is an emotion that all of us can relate to. But Iran did not do that to help Palestine. And that is something that we can objectively say is true. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited this long to do it. They wouldn't have waited for the death of two of their commanders. They wouldn't have waited. If it was about Philistine, it wouldn't have taken this long for that to happen. And I think that is an objective analysis. And that doesn't mean that we are anti-Shi'i, that there's this unit. Now is the time to unite. Unite behind what? Exactly. And forgive my tone. If it appears to be harsh, then please do not judge me harshly. But let's just be very candid and open and honest with each other. We all have this want to see an end to an atrocity that none of us thought that we would live through, that we would ever see in our lifetime. Lessons that we thought that as a collective, we've at least learned this much. When we talk about the West, we talk about their ideology because we know the ideology drives their politics. The hedonism, the secularism, the barbarity that has defined the West for a long time. So when Shahid makes that analysis, we say that's correct. We know that in the UAE, there are ideological implications. Dawah to Salafiyya, the history in the Najd region, in modern terms, you'll hear people talk about the Madakhila and how that plays a role in governance. When people talk about the Gulf countries, when they talk about Saudi, they don't eliminate these aspects of the ideology from also how the region is, how they navigate their politics. We know they're one and the same. When we talk about China, we know that their ideology plays a role in that. So why all of a sudden when Iran launches missiles into Israel, which Israel is doing what they're doing, not merely to get new land and new property, but because of an ideology. Zionism is an ideology. Why now all of a sudden for Iran do we separate their ideology from their motives and what they're doing? And why is now all of a sudden calling that out disuniting the Ummah? Why is it right everywhere else? Everything else is right. You see people say, I agreed with Shahid until he said this about Iran. If you want to cheer someone standing up to the bully, well and good. But this has, by the way, been a very long time coming. It's been a calendar. It's almost been a calendar year since October 7th. And this did not happen because of October 7th. We can be objective and we can be analytical of that. And it doesn't mean that we're dividing the Ummah. It just means that we are calling a spade a spade. So I find it very peculiar, just as leading in that now all of a sudden there's this sort of pushback. Now has always been the time to be united is always now. But we cannot unite upon falsehood. We cannot unite upon someone's delusions. We can't unite upon what someone feels is more correct than this, that, or the third. That's actually what creates the fracture. So I just wanted to lead in and say that. The second thing I want to say as an aside, and then I'll shut up because I feel like I've already spoken too much, but is that when you look at every platform of analysis, almost none of them give a reasonable means for their audience to engage back with them. They don't have open group chats where you can message them. They don't have, they're not doing lives where you can just be commentating and tuning in. They don't do that, which shows you that a lot of these people who are doing this analysis aren't necessarily particularly bothered even with your with your feelings or as if they will check the comment section of their videos and even respond to you. So the fact that this space is even being created in the first place is a testament that there is a desire for a greater good, a higher level of understanding. And I just want to encourage everyone to operate sincerely and upon that good faith. That's been clearly shown. If it was about the popular sentiment, then anything could have been said after that, or silence would have even been better. So just please, I encourage everyone to just have that sort of objectivity. And I just wanted to lead in with that because, it's important to, everyone wants to talk about uniting in the Ummah and stuff. Where's the husn al-dhan? Where's the positive assumption? Where is the, giving the benefit? Where is even just the pragmatism to just say, I can at least see where that's coming from, as opposed to this emotional railing by really a vocal minority. So I just want to say that. Apologies for if this was besides the point, but I want to say that, and I hope that it's well received.
Shukran, Habibi. Brother Ali, I think you wanted to add something, inshallah.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, Brother Tarabi touched on what I'm saying just with a different angle. I mean, if you look at how the West, or America specifically, expanded its sphere of influence, it spent a lot of time demonizing communism and using that as a term to expand its influence. Wherever there's communism, boom, we're going to go there. Boom, we're going to take over this country's infrastructure. And it just happened over and over and over until America became the hegemon that it is today, using international law, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what Iran did isn't very different than that. They watched the game, they learned the game, and they followed the same script. Israel was the common enemy, and as long as they're fighting with the Zionists, they can expand their sphere of influence. And what do we say in America? We say don't hate the player, hate the game. So they're simply a player in a game that was created by the West.
Shukran, Habib, shukran. Okay, the comments are on fire, so I'm happy people are engaging with this space. Alhamdulillah. I'm sorry if anyone's feelings are hurt. As we said again, we're just trying to judge it objectively. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so then just to tie it back, inshallah, to the video, and I'm not saying that you haven't been speaking about it. I just need to, inshallah, just so we can go through every part and understand it in the bigger context, inshallah. So there were these transitional challenges, right, that Iran is facing amidst, again, this shifting global order and especially the shifting regional order, right? So Brother Shahid in the video, he highlights how basically this Iran's commitment to this sectarian religious government, right, since the early or late 70s, it has shaped its identity, right? And it has basically constrained Iran's ability to adapt, to change, to try to somehow reform, right? Because, there's this path dependency, right? They set out an image of themselves and they have to somehow maintain it. But we, based on different content and different spaces that we already spoke about, we know that the old world order is no longer sustainable. It's no longer valid for that region. There are different plans, right? And we know that the situation that Iran is in, it could make this transition to a new role specifically difficult for Iran, right? And it might be even dangerous for the regime that is there. So I just wanted to ask, given Iran's there is this deep-rooted ideological framework that they are basing their policy on and their foreign policy, and there is this public commitment that they have held ever since the revolution, and of course, maybe as Brother Shahid mentioned, it might have been more genuine, more fierce. But I want to ask, what strategic adjustments could Iran realistically pursue to try to somehow navigate this new emerging global order? And basically, not just that, but how can it do that without losing its core identity, right? And we are not trying to change Iran, what Iran is. We're just trying to see how it can fit into this new order in the region, how it can be a player, how it can be, in this team, inshallah, right? We do not hold any animosity towards Iran, right? This is something that needs to be understood, right? A lot of people in the comments feel as if we are hating on Iran and on the people. Not at all. Quite the opposite. We are trying to see how, inshallah, Iran without any violent means can integrate into this region, right? How it can be a collaborative player with people who are around it, right? Inshallah. So yeah, I'm asking what strategic investments or adjustments could Iran pursue to try to be part of this, to try to navigate this new order. And I see Brother NG has his hand up, so I'll be happy to listen to your suggestions, inshallah, Habib.
Yeah, hello. I think,
Salam alaikum.
yeah, I think what we can get out of this is we can infer to basically the meeting, the peace progress that China wants to do between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and one of the things that we can maybe infer or interpret from it is that there could be a an approach to create a slow transition away from the, how you say, the popular rhetoric that Iran is using, because also we have to keep into consideration that if they abandon that popular rhetoric, that also could be a threat to the system there. So it has to be like a slow and smooth phasing out, and I think this would be the most um, logical approach from my viewpoint. I mean, it's 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 at the end of the day, you don't want. At the end of the day, Iran is a pillar of global stability. You don't want that country to collapse. You will open a whole new can of worms of instability, and it's not good for anyone. So I think the meeting between China and Saudi Arabia and Iran is about how to make this transition smooth. I think, and I could be wrong, that there is a recognition by the Iranian authorities themselves that they need to make this transition, because for them to sustain themselves in power, they need to make this adaptive transition, and they want to do it, but they don't want to do it very dramatically that it threatens the stability of the country. So again, this is my interpretation, and feel free to add.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
I
much.
agree.
Salam.
I agree. I'm sorry to interrupt, brother. I think that they are making the transition. They are doing what I think they are doing the needful. And I think with joining BRICS, and by the way, with the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, that was not initiated by China. That's been published a lot, that China is the one that brought them together. In fact, they were already in negotiations, and they brought in China to actually help to give China more of a sort of prominence in Middle Eastern politics. But the rapprochement was undertaken independently between bilaterally, I should say, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This is something that they were already working on. And I think that they, with the joining of BRICS, and now they're within this organization, and they're getting very positive and cooperative feedback from the Arab world. I think this is extremely positive and good. And I think that the history since 1979 has, as I was saying, Iran was in a very difficult position. Part of it was they were in a difficult position because of the nature of their government and the nature of their rhetoric, and then also in the nature of the ideologically expansionist strategy or policy that they wanted to implement. That this really rubbed the whole region the wrong way, and that created a lot of animosity. And then, of course, the animosity between the Sunni and the Shia was drastically and deliberately exacerbated by the United States in Iraq, as well as in Afghanistan to a certain extent, but especially in Iraq, that they tried to create a much more severe and intense level of animosity between Sunnis and Shia. And I think that this has been the sort of framework for regional relationships. And if the Arab countries, if the Gulf countries and the Arab countries generally in the Levant, so-called in Bilad al-Sham, are willing to act on good faith with Iran, and Iran is willing to act on good faith with them and show solidarity and unity, which they are doing, I think that's very positive, and that will, inshallah, end this whole rift that has been the framework for regional politics for, since 1979. So I think that they are doing what they need to do. And I think, as I said, like what you just said, we're not hating on Iran. No, in fact, I am admiring Iran's political savvy that they have exercised for the last almost half a century, and the way that they have been able to survive and the way that they've been able to thrive is quite remarkable. And if you just take a very simplistic, superhero version of what Iran is, then you don't fully appreciate the level of intelligence that they have employed in their relationships with the other countries in the world. And I appreciate that as someone who appreciates realpolitik and who appreciates objective analysis. My objective analysis is that the Iranian regime is quite brilliant. They're very, very good at what they do. And I think that they're extremely, as I say repeatedly again in the video, they're extremely pragmatic. They're very practical. And I think that they will be able to make this transition. It's just a question of whether America will let them make that transition or not. The neocons, the faction of the OCGFC that are aligned with the neocons. It's a question of whether or not they will allow that to happen or not. And I think my personal belief is that it will happen. And I think that Iran will be more integrated into the region, and the hostility between Iran and their neighbors and between Iran and the Khalij will inshallah be resolved. And I think that Iran has proven, as I said, how pragmatic they are, how practical they are, and how realistic they are. And so I think that they're perfectly capable of making that change, although it is going to be a drastic change in their posture, in the way in their posturing, and in their the way they project their image to the world. But we did see some sign of this, and a degree to which it was actually the region and the world generally were receptive to it during the time of Mohammad Khatami, back in the 90s, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Mohammad Khatami was the president of Iran, and he was regarded as this reformer and so forth. And at that time, there was kind of an idea that he might be a kind of Gorbachev figure for Iran. But the situation at that time obviously was very different than it is now, in terms of it being a unipolar world, and there was no BRICS, and there was no rise of the global south at that time. But I think that the global dynamics have shifted and changed in such a way that it will be possible, inshallah, for there to be a kind of a moderating of Iran's the way they position themselves and the way they project themselves to the world, and that their own domestic population, inshallah, will be receptive to that as well.
Ameen ya Rab. Brother Omar, I know your hand must be hurting. You have been raising it for some time.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's always a pleasure to listen to Brother Shahid. So am I audible?
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, so we have to reiterate simple facts here. Okay, so I think it was stated before in many videos of Brother Shahid that, okay, guys, states are not moral actors, okay, and they should be viewed as such. So you cannot expect states to act based on slogans and famous lines and so on and so forth. That's not what states exist for, and that's not how states survive. States survive by maneuvering, by realpolitik, by taking the right decisions at the right time. So whenever you feel like a state is pursuing some sort of slogan, it's not because a state is actually believing in that slogan as much as that state is just finding that pursuing that slogan is in its interests. So this is a very important reminder that we all should be aware of. That's why, like Brother Shahid said, for example, Iraq was targeted and Iran was not targeted, because Iraq, Saddam Hussein, he made all the wrong choices, and they ended up removing him from power, while Iran was making the right choices, and so on and so forth. Any state during this period of time, which is the first years of the 21st century, that made the wrong decisions, usually didn't end up well for the state. So it's very important to assert the reason of state. Okay, it's a fact as simple as early as states were there from old times, from ancient times. So does that mean that religion has nothing to do with state politics? No, of course not. It has something to do. It's a very important decision-making factor, but it's not the only decision-making factor. At the end of the day, the state needs to preserve itself in any way, shape, or form. So it's important to put that in mind as well. And the second point that needs to be made is that you cannot judge a state's actions in the meantime. Of course, we're speculating and we're guessing, but if you listen carefully to the video Brother Shahid has made, he's made that assessment after 45 years of decision-making by Iran. So he's had quite some time to make his assessment, to view the body count, as he said, to view the long-term strategy, and it wasn't something that was made after 5 to 10 years or even 20 years. No, it's something after almost half of a century. So we can sit down, calculate, and have a very, very comprehensive assessment of Iran's long-term strategy during the past half a century. And because we happen to know that any state, again, is moved by the reason of state, we can say that the decisions that were made by Iran as a state led to some instability in the region, and that's perfectly unavoidable. It's a perfectly unavoidable assessment to make. So we have the luxury now to say that, okay, we feel that Iran is making changes, that it's pivoting, because we suddenly see changes in policy, okay? And again, we need to be very calculative, very calm, not propagandized, not reacting to simple, they did this and they did that. We have to view the actions and the policies being made in light of the grand picture, like Brother MG has been wonderfully describing a while ago. So these are two important points to make. The third point is, again, the reason of state dictates that stability is the way forward for the region, okay? Because at the end of the day, money talks, and money talks loud, right? So when we say that the Khalij or the Gulf or the major power players in the region feel that they have a better set of rules to govern the region than the set of rules that the US has been putting for the past 30 to 40 years, for example, and they happen to believe that these set of rules include pumping money all over the region so that it's stable, and so that there is a Belt and Road Initiative made by China, and they want in on it. This is a very important part of the game. And so, as Brother Shahid has said, Iran felt that this change in the situation in the whole region cannot allow Iran to maintain its current course, because it will, in the end of the day, be viewed as the disruptor, and they will feel the vacuum, because no one will be wanting to deal with them. They're just bad players, and we want stability, and we want good roads, good merchandise, good business, essentially, in the region, and they're not having any of it. And so they felt that they have to pivot. And again, this leads to believing that this is a good pivot on Iran's side, because at the end of the day, our metric is a stable region, a peaceful region, an enhanced region, right? So when we say that as a state, Iran made the decisions that led to instability in the region, it's the same calculative manner that allows us to say that now Iran is doing the right, or making the right choices, okay? Because as Brother Shahid has said repeatedly in the video, they want to play ball. And since they want to play ball, it means that they want to change. And this is a very important point, that states that do not change, states that stagnate, are doomed states. At the end of the day, a state has to change according to the new givens in the region, and they have to make the changes as best they can and as quick as they can. So I'm not, of course, really in on the details like Brother MG and Brother Shahid are talking, but I'm admiring that they are willing, in fact, to change. That a state that was initiated in 1979 according to certain principles and certain foundational doctrines, if you want to say, that they are willing to change those principles and those foundational doctrines in order to cope. This is a very remarkable thing that they're doing right now, and it truly deserves admiration. And finally, from a historical perspective, when Sunnis and Shias had good relations, historically speaking, the entire region was booming. Like the Crusades, for example, the entire region, when Salah ad-Din and the assassins from Alamut, right? Those guys they were highly trained assassins, and they used to make high-profile killings just to make a point of how terrorizing they are. Okay, but the moment they cooperated with Salah ad-Din, things changed for the better. So you have to put this in context, that when the different sects of Muslims and the different states governing them, regardless of the doctrine, Sunni or Shi'i, when they had good relationships and when their interests were aligned, because again, they're governed by state reason, it was a very important advancement for the region and for the peoples of the region as a whole. So I hope I made these points clear enough, and Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much.
MashaAllah, brother, MashaAllah. Great minds, you and brother MG and all of the speakers. MashaAllah, Ali, brother Shahid, of course, no need to mention, but I'm very happy that you are speaking up and saying these stuff, because it's very important, alhamdulillah. So thank you very much. So I would maybe just a bit, there was this, in the video, right, brother Shahid highlighted again Iran's narrow focus, right, on supporting the militant groups, right, the focus on militancy, basically, whether it was Hamas in the early days or later on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Like, it didn't invest in infrastructure, in development projects. It really just heavily relied on backing armed proxies to exert its influence in the region. And until now, it has been sufficient for it, right? It has, served its regional objectives, right? Until now, where we have this, again, changing regional landscape, right? But, how has this reliance of Iran on militancy shaped its long-term influence in Lebanon and in other countries in the region? And I would like to ask, what kind of vulnerabilities, right, does this also create for its strategy? Because, again, there is this predetermination that it had set itself on that is very hard to get rid of in some orderly manner, right? What does it say about Iran's objectives, right? Is it trying to prioritize influence, or is it trying to resist, the threat that is there, and as they're trying to present it? I think even from the manner that it's selectively supporting more Hezbollah over Hamas, it illustrates, right, the strategic prioritization, as Brother Shahid alluded in the video, right? So I would like to ask, what implications does this have, right, for Iran, again, as this role that it took on, right? And what are the vulnerabilities and challenges that when trying to transition, right, from this role, from this specific role? Because basically it has established itself as this player, right? So what can it do now? How can it get rid of this? What are the implications basically of this stance that it has taken, right? And how will it be able to change it?
Well, if I may sort of address that, like I said, you have to, when you are actually a minority ideological belief in a region, and you want to expand your influence, and specifically you want to expand your ideological influence, that's very hard to do, and you don't really get a good response. Even the Saudis, when they try to sort of push, back in the day when they were really trying to push Wahhabism, they didn't really get a good response. And it doesn't really work very well. Now, it has worked better for Iran, but the fundamental, as I said earlier, the fundamental basis for it working was the existence of Israel, because it had to be positioned as a resistance to Israel. So it has depended upon the antagonism with Israel in order to spread their influence, as I said, except for Iraq. But in Syria and Lebanon, it has been, this has been the main way that they've gained acceptance in the countries where they wanted to have influence. And the result of that in Lebanon, of course, has been extremely destabilizing. The situation in Lebanon became extremely destabilized to the point of even Rafiq Hariri being assassinated, with Hezbollah members being indicted for that. So it has put them in a vulnerable position because it's contingent upon the same thing that Israel's existence is contingent upon, which is a continuous conflict. So if there is a movement in the region for actually resolving the conflict, that puts your sphere of influence and your expansion under threat. There's no way that you can maintain that without conflict, because that's been the whole basis for your appeal. Let me put it this way. States have frequently backed militant groups, rebels, paramilitaries, and what have you. The U.S. has done it. Russia, Soviet Union did it. I mean, you could look at the Kurds, for example. They were backed and then they were dropped. The U.S. supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, then they dropped them. Pakistan supported the Taliban and then they dropped them. America supported the Contras and then they dropped them. Syria at one point supported the PLO or Fatah and they dropped them. So, even at one point there was support within parts of the Egyptian government for the Ikhwan al-Muslimin and they dropped them. So it's not an unusual thing to happen that a state supports a militia or a paramilitary group or what have you, and then drops them. That's a thing that happens all the time. And I think that that's probably what will happen with Hezbollah at a certain point. And I think, as I said, now this is the part of the video that I will admit is conjecture on my part, which is that the assassination of Hania was allowed by Iran, and that Hassan Nasrallah was sacrificed, and that there was some level of collaboration or coordination or cooperation between Iran and Israel with regards to the pager attack. I will admit that that's conjecture on my part because it just makes sense to me. Because I think that, as I said in the video, I think everyone understands, and now that Iran is a part of BRICS and is trying to participate in the regional project for stability and for conflict resolution, they understand that we have to let these militant groups go. And as I said in the video, the way that you let those militant groups go, you can't disband them, because that would be very dangerous to your own, to the image that you've created. So they have to be weakened. The leadership has to be removed, and they have to be weakened by means of conflict. And the positive side of that is that they can be weakened by means of a conflict that will also weaken Israel, because what Israel is doing is weakening them tremendously. And as I said, a fanatic like Netanyahu doesn't understand that. Just like some people maybe in the comment section think that whenever something explodes, it equals a victory. Netanyahu thinks that he's victorious. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, we won't know the numbers until later, of Israelis are fleeing. The economy is in a downward spiral. Their military capacity is weakening, and globally they're getting more and more isolated. So Israel is on the way out. This is all part of the process of removing those three obstacles that I mentioned in the video: Zionism, militancy, and potentially the religious regime in Iran. But I think that, as I said also in the video, I think that Iran, and as I'm saying now, I think that Iran is trying to do whatever they can to say that third element in the region can remain, and you don't have to regard it as a threat, because the religious regime in Iran is pragmatic, and we're able to work with everybody, and we don't have a problem with solidarity with the other countries in the region. So they're agreeing, in my view, they're agreeing that the first two elements do have to be removed from the region, Zionism and militancy, so that the broader project in the region can actually flourish and succeed. I think that they are, in my opinion, they are signed on to that project. And I think that the way of getting rid of the militant groups is to basically let them die heroically in a struggle against Israel. It sounds very heartless and it sounds very ruthless, but this is politics. This is state politics. This is international politics. And as I said, supporting and then dropping support for militant groups happens all the time. And there's no reason to think, again, that Iran is any different than any other state and that they make decisions on any basis other than sheer pragmatism and realism. And this is why I made the video, to say that Iran operates like everybody else does. If you have a need to believe something else, if you have a need to believe in a superhero myth about Iran, that's up to you. But that's not, it doesn't even remotely approach being analysis.
MashaAllah. So exactly, now we are at this part where we are basically trying to think about the future of Iran, inshallah. So, and the present time, right? And how it's basically trying to readjust, right? And trying to fit with the agenda of BRICS, right? Trying to align itself with BRICS interest, right? And basically, what we are seeing is that Iran is trying to somehow distance itself from militancy. And again, as Brother Shahid said and Brother MG before, that it's trying to avoid this dramatic break, right? That could lead to some backlash. So I wanted to ask just my colleagues here, considering Iran's involvement, historical involvement in this militancy, right? And now it has been in this gradual dissolution of its own militant proxies. So what does this signify, right? Like, or what does this shift indicate about its sort of willingness to redefine, right? Its identity, its especially ideological identity, right? And also its geopolitical strategy in the region, right? And also what I would follow up with a question, by doing this, by trying to transition, by trying to shift, what are the challenges and possibly even some internal risks that Iran faces? What are the challenges by doing that, right? By doing this shift?
Just I was just going to say the challenge is the same as the people in the comment section. That's the biggest challenge for the regime in Iran. You think that wallahi, you think that you're supporting Iran, but you're making it very, very difficult for them. You're forcing them into a position to play the part that you need them to play, rather than being realistic and taking care of their own future. People in the comment section who are insisting on the Iron Man role for Iran, you're going to get regime change in that country if you don't stop. Wallahi, if you don't come to your senses and start dealing with things in a realistic way, you're going to bring the end to that country. You're going to bring an end to that regime. If you insist on denying the reality that Iran is a very practical and a very savvy and a very realistic, pragmatic country, and you force them into upholding the image that you have of them, you're going to ruin them. You are sentencing them to destruction just to satisfy your own emotional needs. That's very irresponsible, and you couldn't hate that country more than by what you're doing. This is the threat that they face: is people who are ideologically blinded by their need for Iran to be this certain kind of way that satisfies your emotional needs. And okay, to a certain extent, Iran has put themselves in that position by their own posturing and their own the ethos that they created for themselves. But they need to be able to transition out of that, and you need to help them with that. You need to help them transition out of that if you want them to survive.
And especially we have seen that to, of course, a lesser degree, but this ideological handicap that, countries then face at some certain point, right? And exactly as you correctly highlighted, it's about the population, right? SubhanAllah, I cannot say it better, but it's a pattern that has occurred in different countries in the past, even 2 decades, that is being seen now, right? And that's the biggest obstacle for some peaceful transition, inshallah. And yeah, Brother Adi, please, I think you opened your mic before, but didn't get the chance to say something. So if you want to add something.
Yeah, no, I mean, Iran has basically, its investments have basically been very military industrial complex like. So just like the MIC, it's not sustainable going into the future. I mean, it requires for the conflicts to be perpetual for it to keep making money. But in the end of the day, Iran is a resource-rich country. It has the Strait of Hormuz, and it's in a very great geographical area for trade between Asia and Europe and the Middle East. So obviously, this is what they have to offer, and this is what they will bring. The biggest point I wanted to make, Brother Shahid already kicked it for me, so he did. He took care of that. Is that their biggest challenge is going to be that they have set themselves up as ideologues, and that's the one thing that they're going to have to fight against moving forward.
Ya Rabb, inshallah. Yeah, brother Turabi, I see your hand raised. Please.
You know, I've seen this sort of rhetoric, this knee-jerk reaction of, you know what? If you disagree with me, you're clearly a Zionist, which is absolutely insane. Or if you are saying this about Iran, then you're anti-Ummah unity, which is such an emotional response that you can't even claim to be objective if you hear someone say something and then you immediately label them so you don't have to understand what was said. But let's just, for a moment, put ourselves in the shoes of people who do want to say that, no, Iran is finally doing something for Palestine while all these other countries are cowards. Iran is finally standing up to Israel, which is an extension of the Western hegemonic power in the region. Iran is finally doing it. If Iran was doing all of those things the way that people want to project their personal wishes onto this country's politics, if it was really that, then Iran would get Iraqed. I will say this again. If Iran was really this thing that you want to believe, 100%, their motives, their maneuvers, everything that they're doing is for Philistine, and it's independent of all of these sellouts and so on and so forth. If it was really like that, then don't you know democracy would be expedited, shipping over to them immediately? Don't you know that? Haven't you seen that? Haven't you seen that happen in the region before? Now you may say, yeah, but Iran, missiles and stuff. Ahbab, my beloved brothers and sisters in humanity, come on. But they will fight back. Didn't Afghanistan? Didn't Iraq? I know soldiers who went over there in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Are they free yet? When all that democracy that was brought over to Afghanistan 20 years later, then we handed it back to the Taliban. If Iran was everything that you want it to be, then don't you know that freedom would be brought to them expeditiously? So, I mean, I'm not going to speak to the hyper politics because I'll be very candid. I'll be very honest. I'm not a person who's online very much, if really at all, but I find the averse response, the availability heuristics that's just kicking in so fast and so hard to just be jarring. I find it to be shocking that we're taking political maneuvering and trying to infuse our emotions into it like we're looking at actors on a screen, like we're watching, two sports teams competing and you're either cheering for the team or you're rooting for them to lose. No, we're all cheering for the Ummah. As I said earlier, we all want to see Philistine freed. We all want to see these really demonic powers ended. We all want to see that, but it's not going to come to fruition through this hyper fantasization of trying to make it seem like global politics is not operated rather cruelly in the most calculated and beneficial way possible. As was also pointed out in the video, Iran and Israel have been on the brink of X, Y, and Z for so long. Now, all of a sudden, you think that it's changed. And now, all of a sudden, that it's changed. They're just going to be able to do this and no one's going to say anything. Come on. Let's just be realistic. We ask Allah to give us open hearts and open minds. Allahumma
Ameen, Habibi. MashaAllah. Brother Omar, please.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. So regarding the domestic challenges, I think those can be mitigated rather easily. I'm not saying it's going to be, beds and roses, but when you get that propagandized, I think you can make the transition. It's going to be bumpy and all, but at the end of the day, you can make the transition because, again, okay, a very important point here to make is that, okay, so we know that the region is cooperating with BRICS, okay? And everyone seems to forget that BRICS is essentially an economic alliance. It's not. It started as an economic alliance. It's taking political decisions right now, but it started as an economic alliance. And historically speaking, you know, economic alliances tended to fare much better than political ones, because who doesn't want money, essentially? So it's more cohesive, and it's more what can you say? It's stronger. It's a lot stronger at the end of the day, and it's a lot stronger because it promises everyone money, right? So if you are able to propagandize into Iran, into all those who subscribe to the propaganda or to the ideology that you built your foundational doctrine on, then you can easily say that, okay, guys, look to the future in a matter of, you know, a decade or 2 decades tops. We are going to all be flourishing, and there would be lots of opportunities, lots of jobs, lots of market opportunities for everyone. So I think because a lot of people already subscribe to the ideology and blindly follow, then they can be persuaded in the other direction. But that's just me. I'm not sure if it's true or not. But if you promise money, who doesn't want money? Okay, if you promise stability, if you promise open markets, if you promise a region that's flourishing economically speaking, an open market for all, and you know, you have trading with your Islamic brothers and sisters, and trading with Islamic countries, essentially the new Europe that's been circulating, then yeah, who wouldn't want to subscribe to that, right? So I think it's going to be bumpy, but again, everyone's loyal to the ideology, and everyone's loyal to the people behind the ideology. So when the people change the ideology, the subscribers will follow, more or less. So it's going to be bumpy, and some people are going to get shocked, sure, but at the end of the day, I think the promised goal is much more sustainable, if you will. So I hope that answers the domestic challenge question.
MashaAllah, brother. And this is exactly something that Brother Shahid has been mentioning many times, right? You know, changes are bumpy, right? It's a serious transition that all of the countries are going through, right? It doesn't take days or weeks, it will take some months, some years. So, inshallah, you know, but people need to keep this in mind. I mean, you know, thank you very much for your contribution. You speak very eloquently, mashallah. You add a lot of value, alhamdulillah, to the space. So thank you, brother. Okay, I just want to hint, you know, brother MG, he, you know, hinted at something like the neocons and their interest in this, right? And basically, when we are speaking about Israel, we need to speak about US strategy, right? Because that's the only purpose of Israel, right? For the US. So, you know, there has been in the video, in the latter parts, right? There was this discussion about the diminishing influence of the neocons, right? In shaping US policy. And they are basically the ones that try to maintain Iran as this controlled adversary, right? And it has been profitable for both US and Israel, of course, right? So they also admit that this, you know, Brother Shahid mentions that they know that a full destruction of Iran would basically destabilize the region and eliminate its convenient role, right? And then, you know, he goes on to mention that while some aggressive factions, he mentioned this lady, they might rhetorically support the idea of destroying Iran, but they also recognize and deep down know that it's impractical and that there are a lot of strategic risks associated with it, and also a loss of profits, right? Which is the most important part for them, right? So, you know, Iran has been kept in this position to play a certain role and to keep a strategic way of how business is basically done in the Middle East, right? And, you know, there was this unresolved question is whether regime change in Iran can occur without war, or if it has to be somehow, you know, in a violent manner, which no one of us wants to see this at all, right? Astaghfirullah. So I wanted to ask, like, can the US, right, with how it's supporting the current stance and the current role of Iran, can it somehow support, or realistically, is there any option for the US to support a non-violent regime change? And if so, how can it do that without undermining its own, strategic interests in the Middle East, right? And of course, we know that the BRICS are trying basically to isolate America, to remove it from the picture. And we all hope that, inshallah, right, that will be firstly done through the elimination of Zionism, right? But I want to know, what will the US approach to Iran look like in the case that Iran starts to transition, which it already is, but will it start to, support covert operations inside of Iran? Will it try to support rebels? As we have seen in, whenever a country tries to shift away from the influence of the US, and especially from the influence of the neocons, these things start to happen, right? So, yeah, that's my question, right? What will the stance of the US be in relation to this transition, right? How will it view its role in the region? How will it support or not support or go against, or, all of these questions related to this idea, right? So, if anybody wants to speak, well, they think, Sister Wahida, feel free to continue.
Assalamu alaikum. The United States of America is a vampire nation. We exist off of the blood of others. It would take a massive movement in our national political leadership and economic leadership mentality to accept the spread of peace in regions on this earth where we have made our money through war and various kinds of economic instability. This nation's populace lives in an incredible bubble. We have very little actual real news here. The news has devolved into opinion. You don't get very much hard news. And people outside of the United States really have no idea how insular we are with regard to our political, military, and economic viewpoints. So I do not expect an American messiah to appear and sit in the Pentagon with the other planners and decide to accept the changeover with regard to Iran. I believe that the United States will do what it can to put as many roadblocks in place in order to prevent or at least drastically slow down this positive change that it can. That is the way we have operated historically. I don't see any evidence of a change. And let me be really clear, because one of the things this video of Brother Shaheed's does is it attempts to shatter myths. I am an African American, a longtime African American descended from enslaved people. I do not want my Muslim brothers and sisters throughout the world to make the mistake of believing that Black American people are their allies. I am an extreme anomaly amongst African Americans, and the vast majority of African American people are not the friends of the global South. The vast majority of African American people are completely willing to take part in any action, no matter how bloody, no matter how surreptitious, to guarantee a continuation of their way of life. African American people make those kinds of decisions. Biden is senile. Biden has had one cabinet meeting all year, and he turned the reins of it over to his wife on camera, that means that the de facto president of the United States has been Kamala Harris. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Charles Q. Brown Jr., is a Black American. The Secretary of Defense of the United States, Lloyd Austin, is a Black American. And the person whose job it is to block any ceasefire in the Gaza Israel situation is UN Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield. She is a Black American. So the four top people, 2 men and 2 women, who are politically ruling this nation are all Black Americans. And it is under their watch that this Gazan genocide was formulated, armed, and paid for. Understand that. And, so I don't expect any kind of massive sea change in America. And I expect us to continue to try to destabilize Afghanistan, Iran, the whole region.
Can I just address that? The question, as well as, I guess, Sheikh Wahida's comments. In my opinion, America is already getting driven out of the region. Their influence is drastically decreased. If America had the same power and influence in the region that they used to have, say 20 years ago, all of the people of Gaza would have already been expelled into the Sinai. This is something that they actually demanded back in October 2023, and they were refused. And they demanded many other things. They then demanded for Egypt to take control over security in the Gaza Strip. They were refused. They demanded for the Palestinian Authority to take over security in the Gaza Strip, and they were refused. They demanded for all of the for the Gulf states to take over security in the Gaza Strip, and they were refused. They're not getting their way anymore, and the only one who is sort of going along with them now is Israel, for obvious reasons. Now, I think that we can look at the when the announcement was made for the reestablishment of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. America was not in the loop, and they basically found out about it after the fact. And their response was to sort of shrug their shoulders and say, well, I guess that's a good thing. They're not involved very much in what's going on in the region. And I think that when the time comes and Iran does, because I think what Iran is trying to do is to avoid regime change by changing their sort of attitude and changing their position on things. They're trying to change they're trying to change the regime without regime change. And I think that when that occurs, and it occurs by maybe more dramatic policy decisions on the part of Iran, we'll probably see something like the same type of a reaction from America, which is just to sort of shrug their shoulders because no one really cares what you have to say anymore. And you are being ushered out of the region. So this is what I expect. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that, as I said, there are now sort of 2 factions of the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. And only one of those factions is tied to the military-industrial complex, or rather dependent upon the military-industrial complex. And that, again, is the faction that is represented by the neocons politically. But, for example, if you look at BlackRock, the asset management company, everyone knows about BlackRock. They have ownership across every sector, every corporate sector, every industrial sector, every financial sector. BlackRock has interests across the entire economy, not just the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex is a page in their portfolio. And I don't think that they want to see their broad and diverse interests undermined for the sake of that one page in their portfolio. And I think that we've seen the sort of a connection made between Saudi Arabia and BlackRock, between UAE and BlackRock, recently even between Egypt and BlackRock, and that represents. I'm just using BlackRock as an example because it's sort of you can sort of say that that's a symbol or a mascot of the larger and richer and more powerful and more influential faction of the OCGFC, and they are, in my opinion, from what I have observed. I think that they are in favor of American isolation in the Middle East, that they're in favor of getting the U.S. out because the U.S. only knows one way of approaching international affairs anywhere in the world up until now, which is disruption. Disruption, destabilization, bombing, war, and so on. And that's against the interests of this broader faction of the owners and controllers of global financialized capital who are interested in developing the Middle East. Because if you look at, that region, Bilad al-Sham, it's just logical for it to basically be the center of the world economy. It connects Asia, it connects Africa, connects Europe with trade routes. It's resource rich. It just makes sense for that region, and it historically has been the center of empires. It was the center of ours. It was the center even of the Roman Empire. So that region is extremely important, and it doesn't serve anyone's interest for it to be in conflict anymore, for it to be in endless conflict, and to not be developed. I think that they want to see development from Gaza all the way to Anatolia in Turkey. They want to see that whole region developed, and I think that they will eventually overrule the neocons. I think that because, as I said, we're already seeing that they've lost a great deal of their influence, that because they used to be the only influence. This is why America's policies have been what they've been, because the military-industrial complex was the single solitary engine of the American economy. That is changing, and it's also changing that the owners and controllers of global financialized capital are now global. They are a-national, so they're not their decisions and what they support isn't centered around what's going to be beneficial for the United States. They're only concerned about what's beneficial for their shareholders, and they have shareholders from all around the world. So I think that these changing global dynamics will probably mute any response from the Americans when Iran does sort of moderate their position and starts trying to be sort of participate more in that regional project for development, inshallah.
Ameen ya Rab. Ameen. Ameen. Okay, so we are kind of reaching the end of this session, but there are two main points or two questions that I still have in my mind, so I think I would like them to be addressed. I wanted to ask, like, what specific, right? Because we have been talking a bit in general, right? That, it needs to leave this militancy, try to cooperate, try to shift, try to transition. But what specific economic and political mechanisms could Iran employ to still maintain its influence in the region, right? And would these steps that you might mention just try to consider or follow up with it? Would these be enough to offset the potential loss, right, of the current power structure that it has, right? Because as you have said many times, Brother Shahid, Zionism is becoming obsolete, right? It's not going to be there, inshallah, in the next couple of years. So what will be the, basically what will it hold on to, right? Like what will be the support for its approach, right? There is no more this hostile enemy, right? Yeah, so maybe this question, and I would add also, sorry, sisters, Salma, I will let you ala tool immediately. Yeah, like what steps, not just economic and political, but like, yeah, maybe, okay, just, to ensure its long-term survival, right? And to move towards, inshallah, a stable and, to integrate economically and politically into the region. So if you have any ideas, feel free to share them, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair, Brother Kareem. I mean, from the way it looks at this juncture, I mean, with all of the past couple of decades of the Iran's alignment with the region and in its investment in perpetuating these sectarian divisions in the region, now that this is going to be obsolete, now it will be like really trying to look for a friend group, and the friend group is the BRICS. So it would try to align itself with the grand BRICS plan and just, toe the line. I think that's the reality that it has to face next, because it has, invested itself in this alignment with Israel and America for a long time now. So now that this scenario is getting obsolete, so it has to align itself with BRICS and toe the line with BRICS. That's the future.
If Iran was able to sort of normalize with the region and integrate into the region and didn't have an antagonistic relationship with the region, there's no limit to the amount of economic influence they could potentially have. This would be a huge boost for their economy, and Iran is a bountiful nation. It's an it's a nation of abundance. They have so much there. They have so many resources there. They have so much that they have been sort of crippled in terms of their economic development, and now it's starting to thrive for the first time in many years. And I think that the sky is the limit. If they want to have more, if they want to maintain influence, I think that they can take a page from the book of the Khalij and have influence economically rather than through militancy. They can have a great deal of influence economically through investment and so on. Not to mention culturally, I think they can have a lot of influence if they abandon the idea of trying to sort of push their sectarian ideology in the region. Then people will be more receptive to them, and there won't be the animosity so much. And I think, as I said, if they're able to reach their full potential as an economic power, it will be considerable. They have just like immeasurably more resources naturally than any of the Gulf countries. So I mean, they have great potential to develop economically, and if they are allowed, if they are able to have the room and have the space to actually develop even more economically, the sky's the limit, I think, and there won't be any animosity towards them. I think this as I've been saying, the signs and the signals that they've been getting from the Gulf, and again, as Selma said, the fact that they're within BRICS, the potential is great for them. And now I just saw that BRICS has set a rule that if you're a member of BRICS, you can't participate in sanctions against any BRICS country. This is going to be incredibly beneficial and profitable for Iran, because that's something that has really damaged them. They've still been able to function. They've still been doing business. And in fact, although people will hate to hear it, they have been doing business with the Israelis, but they've been doing it through third parties, through Turkey, through Cyprus, through the UAE, and so on, and shell companies and what have you. But if they can do things directly, this is going to be just incredibly beneficial for them. And if countries that are members of BRICS don't have to try to circumvent the sanctions against Iran, then this also opens up the opportunity for Iran to invest more in member countries of BRICS. So I think it's really good, and the sky's the limit in terms of the level of influence they can have once they're able to fully reach their potential as an economy.
I would just like to add, I mean, sure, they were responsible for all these proxies that are in the region, but they could actually position themselves as a mediator in these regional conflicts, and simply start mediating these conflicts that they were responsible for previously in Yemen and Syria and Lebanon. And this will rebrand them as someone who's trying to mitigate what they have previously done. America does it all the time when their proxies get out of hand and they say, pull the brakes. So Iran can do the same thing and act as a conflict mediator.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Of course, first of all, thanks to your great comments. I'm very happy that you share your ideas with us. I'm very happy that, alhamdulillah, you can voice your opinions. Also, thank you very much to our speakers. We basically, alhamdulillah, covered what was needed from this video. Of course, one can go on and on about this, right? Because it's a really intensive and deep topic, and it's related to the whole region and the whole changing world order. So, there are lots of aspects one to ponder about, but of course, each of us can do this on their own, inshallah. I hope that you benefited from this as much as I have, alhamdulillah, and I hope even our speakers learned something new, inshallah. Great contributions from everyone as always. So, we went over this historical perception that they have presented to us, right, about Iran and Israel and their relationship and this antagonistic relationship that is even not probably there, right? We try to cover basically what is going to be the new role of Iran in the new world order, inshallah, right? How it can transition, how it can shift its way, how it can shift its deeply rooted ideologies, right? How, inshallah, lots of stuff to cover, but we covered a lot of them, inshallah. Thank you very much who joined. Thank you very much who commented. Thank you very much who spoke, especially. So, alhamdulillah, I hope to see you, inshallah, again next week. And take care, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.